I'm always kind of going through my list of who do I think is doing, really great work at my company, and, just reach out to them, set up a one-on-one, set up coffee or lunch. And I've never had anyone say, no, I'm not going to meet with you. So, really just getting on their calendars and understanding, what's working for them, what's not, what's kind of keeping them up at night.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is from Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning. He learned it in a very serious way as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, but he was a psychiatrist, and he used his experience in the Holocaust to write that book, one of the 10 most influential books of all time, according to the Library of Congress, to help us all learn to live better lives, which includes better work lives as well. As a marketer, it can feel like you're in the eye of the storm with so much happening to you. But as our next guest reminds us, even in the times that seem most challenging to us, the only thing you can control is your attitude. That's right. When things are out of control, you are still in control of something. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Regina DeMars, the Director of Content Marketing and Strategy at FNBO. Thanks for joining us, Regina.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's take a quick look at your background so people understand who I'm talking to. You started on the agency side as a PR specialist at Weber Shandwick. Then you went on to the brand side and were Director of Integrated Marketing at ConAgra Foods. And now Regina is a Director of Content Marketing and Social Media Strategy at FNBO, where she's worked for the past 8 years. FNBO is the First National Bank of Omaha, a subsidiary of First National of Nebraska. First opened in 1857, First National of Nebraska has $30 billion in assets and 5,000 employees. Regina manages a team of 5 people, both internal and external communications. So Regina, give us an understanding. What is your day like as Director of Content Marketing and Strategy?
Yeah, my team is responsible for managing all of our FNBO branded channels. So that includes Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, TikTok. We have an employee Facebook group. We also manage a Cashology Facebook page that's focused on really providing financial advice and guidance. We have a YouTube series, and I also lead our social selling programs for our sales teams, our brand ambassador efforts, influencer marketing, and our blog. So that's a lot of content that we're creating across a lot of channels. So any given day, I'm brainstorming the right content based on the audiences who are engaged on each of those channels, and then writing content for them and developing the creative.
And I'm guessing you do a good job of staying on brand, because you even call that social media platform X, which I cannot do yet. I cannot handle seeing that repost button. I am not used to that yet. But anyway, maybe a smarter man than me made a good rebranding decision, but I haven't figured that out. Let's talk about you. Let's talk a look at one of the first lessons from the things you made in your career. You said, and I mentioned this in the beginning, the only thing you can control is your attitude. So I'm guessing, Regina, that was a hard-fought lesson, a lesson learned under just difficult circumstances. So tell us how you learned that.
Yeah, it's definitely a guiding principle that I find myself leaning into a lot. I always tell my employees, myself, and my children that all you can do is control your attitude. And, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you react to it that matters. I've managed a lot of people over the years, and being able to reflect on that and lean into that can really help you grow in your career. There's always going to be something in your way. There's always going to be an excuse, but you'll have self-doubt. But if you look at it and just try to have the right mindset, you can work through those challenges. And I find that every time you do that, it sets you up better in the future. One example of this was when I worked at ConAgra Foods. I had been there for 10 years, and we knew that the company was going to move headquarters from Chicago to Omaha, and so many people were just, super frustrated. I kind of felt like I was a therapist, and rather than focusing on getting discouraged by the situation because there's nothing you could do to control it. And a lot of people were just worried and thought, I'm never going to find another job. And I really kind of tried to focus my energy on what can I control. So I networked in the Omaha area and really thought about what I wanted in my next career.
And you networked in the Omaha area. We think about what you want in your next career. So take us, how did you get to your current role?
Yeah. So I met with a lot of people who had left ConAgra and were working at different companies and wanted to better understand what the culture was. One of the main things I was looking for was stability and a company who had been around for a long time. And I met with a former colleague who I worked with at ConAgra Foods. She was at FMBO. She loved working there, and now they've been around for 165 years. So I knew that they were very stable, and it was just something that clicked with me. She loved the culture. She loved the work. She loved the people that she worked with. So I took that leap of faith and started there and have been there for 8 years now.
So that's a great example. And, when it's something in our career that really hits hard and is personal. Let me ask you, what about for like a marketing project or campaign you had to work on? Like so many times I feel like I hear from marketers, like they're frustrated, they're working on a campaign and it's like, oh, but I can't control this or I can't control that. And, like for me, at Mech Labs Institute, which is our parent organization, we have a series of heuristics or thought tools. And, readers have reached out to us before, and I've written even a cheat sheet of these different heuristics because it really helps you like focus around, okay, these are the factors that I'm focused on. So like, what of these factors can I control? What can I change? What can I add to? What can I remove? Or what must I keep the same? So those heuristics have been a really helpful thing in my career when I'm working on a piece of marketing. But for you, Regina, what about when you're working on some marketing? Hey, there's some element you can't control. Boy, that's frustrating, but you still need to produce results. So what have you done in those situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like my mother always told me growing up, I never took no for an answer easily. And so, especially working in a heavily regulated environment, a lot of the times people weren't maybe understanding a new channel. Good example is TikTok. We got a lot of feedback. We don't want to be on this channel. There's too much risk. We don't want to move forward with it. And so it took a lot of education. So I feel like every time I hear maybe, no, we can't do that. Like, okay, how can I help kind of sell this in? How can I get you comfortable with it? I obviously, don't want to get in trouble. But I want to think through like, what is the risk versus reward? And really took the time to educate. And I mean, that one actually took 2 years to educate people in the organization to get them comfortable with it. So I feel like I always really try to listen to what the concerns are, no matter where I've been in my career, and say, okay, what is kind of keeping somebody from wanting us to move forward, and how can I help them? How can I help them get there and be able to test things? I do that a lot. I'll say, okay, what if we just test this in a small pilot or in one market, and so there's less risk, and then prove the results that way so we can move forward in a bigger way.
Yeah, I like ease your way in. Let's let the customer decide. Let's try it out and see how they react. I like it. Which actually brings us to our next lesson where testing can really help. Step out of your comfort zone. So you're talking about helping others step out of their comfort zone, doing TikTok from a bank. How have you stepped out of your own comfort zone? How have you learned that lesson?
Yeah, so I learned this lesson really early on. I grew up in a small town, went in Nebraska, and I went to the University of Nebraska and loved it, but I always felt like I I needed something more. And I always knew everyone growing up. And so I think I just wanted to not know anybody. So went from the smallest town to the biggest city in the United States. So I graduated from college and I drove to New York City by myself, 21 years old. I had several interviews, but I did not have a job at the time. And my mother was hesitant but supportive. My father didn't talk to me for 6 months, but I decided, I'm going to go and I can always come home, but I didn't want to regret it. And I just had a feeling that I needed to go to New York City. And it was the best decision that I ever made. I went there, I got a job with an awesome PR firm, Weber Shandwick, and I just met so many people that have, at the time I wouldn't have known, that have helped me through my career years later. So set me up for success longer term. I got to meet and work with so many amazing marketers. Started out from a PR perspective, then kind of changed to social media. And the president of Weber Shandwick actually helped me get my job in Omaha when I wanted to move back to Nebraska with ConAgra Foods.
So that was when you started your career. Right now, I imagine in your role, you manage a team of 5. There's probably some early career people you're working with, either at your vendors or on your team. So what do you do to help encourage them to step out of their comfort zone? Because, when you're coming in, when you can think about that, that was really daring going all the way to New York, where you're coming in, hey, you've been in college, this is your first job, this is a bank. It seems intimidating, right? So you might be a little gun shy, especially if you're having to, monitor social channels and write directly from the bank. Someone's having an issue with the bank. So what do you do to kind of, is there anything that's worked to help encourage them to step out of their comfort zone? What do you do as a leader?
Yeah, I have always loved mentoring people. And I think people see that because a lot of people will, text me, hey, there's somebody new, not even within marketing. Can you mentor them? And I think the main thing is I do always try to tell them that, if you're not learning something, if you're not challenging yourself, then it's time to move on. It's difficult because, sometimes you get into a groove and you're comfortable and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stay here. But anytime I've ever mentored anybody or talked to people on my team or even my kids, I tell them the same thing. I'm like, if you're comfortable, it's time to try something new because you're not going to grow and you're not going to learn. And you really learn a lot about yourself when you put yourself out there and try something new.
So for someone on your team, I guess this could be at find another role, but it's also, okay, what is the next challenge you can take within our team? Like, are you helping to kind of find that next challenge and find like, okay, who needs to be stretched a little to take this on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely, in my one-on-one conversations with team members, both the FMBO at ConAgra and at Weber Shandwick. So my entire career, I'll say, what are you looking to do next? And of course, sometimes that does mean maybe I'm going to lose really strong talent on my team, but I care about them and I want them to grow in their career as well. And sometimes that has made, people that have been on my team, then they get promoted and they're my peers. And I love just watching people, grow personally and professionally. So I just always am encouraging them, get out there and try something new. Or even if you're stagnant at your current company and you want more and it's been years and you're not getting there and you're frustrated, like try a challenge and try something new. And sometimes people have left and come back and it's worked really well for them too.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that relationship building is important in your career. So you talked about relationship building with your team there. You said it's so important to take the time to build relationships with the people you work with. It builds trust in each other and team effectiveness. So how do you build those relationships?
Yeah, I think it's really important. There's been so many examples of if you know someone really well, you can work through challenges and issues and hard situations easier than if you don't know someone. Or, think about sometimes if you get an email from somebody you know versus somebody you don't, and the tone of it changes if you know that person and you have a connection. So I make sure to, connect with my team frequently. We have one-on-ones. And even if a conflict arises, I make sure to text them and say, how are things going? Is there anything I can do? In our team meetings, we often will go around the room and I'll say, okay, how's this week going? Rank from, 1 to 10. And, if they say 6, I'm like, how can we get you to a 10? I always make sure I'm thanking them for their hard work and contributions, but also want to figure out, what is something, if they are going through a challenge, what can I help them with? We also do a lot of team building outside of work. So I have team members in different locations, but we try to get together at least once a month, and we rotate who kind of takes the lead on planning them, because everybody has different interests. So I don't want to be the one that's planning them all the time, because I might do what I like to do the best. But we rotate that, and it's come up with some really cool, diverse ideas. This month we went and to a place called Fat Putter. It's a miniature golf place, but you play games, and there's a lot of competition in that too. So it's just kind of fun to see people's personalities come out and just build that relationship, not just in the office, but outside the office too.
That's great. And I wonder, what about outside the marketing organization, right? What about with your peers in other departments? So, for example, I interviewed Jean Hopkins, the chief revenue officer of OneScreen.ai, on How I Made It Marketing. One of her key lessons was build strong CFO relationships. And she talked about how building that CFO relationship really helped her when they were doing 40 events in one year and all the T&E expenses were coming out of the marketing budget. And then she had that relationship to be able to talk and say, like, well, wait a minute, should these all be coming out of my budget? So for you, like, how have you built those relationships outside of the marketing organization, and how do you use those in your day to day?
Yeah. I make sure that I'm always kind of going through my list of who do I think is doing, really great work at my company, and, just reach out to them, set up a one-on-one, set up coffee or lunch. And I've never had anyone say, no, I'm not going to meet with you. So, really just getting on their calendars and understanding, what's working for them, what's not, what's kind of keeping them up at night. And we are very fortunate at FMBO. We do a lot of employee organized events. We're very involved in the community. So we'll do Habitat for Humanity. Last week, I went with my team and Girls Inc., and we volunteered locally there as part of our United Way Day of Caring. So we do a lot of more organized events beyond just my smaller team. Our entire marketing team went to a baseball game last week, and again, it's just there. It gives you a chance to talk to people that you may not talk to on a regular basis, to build those relationships. So you feel more comfortable if there's a question that you have, you can just text them rather than setting up an hour meeting with them, or, emailing and waiting for people to respond back. If you have that stronger connection, then you feel like you can just pick up the phone or text them for a quick answer.
Yeah, especially with so many teams remote and hybrid these days, actually having that face-to-face connection can help. Well, people are key to our careers. As I mentioned, first, we talked about stories from the things you made in marketing. In just a moment, we're going to talk about lessons from the people you collaborated with. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MECLABS Institute, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. You can get the power of 10,000 marketing experiments working for you. Play with MECLABS AI by signing up for a free trial at meclabs.com/AI. That's MECLABS.com/AI. All right. So as I mentioned, we build things. That's a really cool thing about being a marketer, right? We build brands, we build content, right? But we also get to build them with people. Like you talked about, those relationships are important to you. So let's look at some of the lessons you learn from specific people. One of them is live a purpose-driven life. And you learned this from Katrina Wells, your Senior VP of Corporate Marketing at FNBO. How did you learn this from Katrina?
Yeah. So a couple months ago, she actually led a book club for our marketing team, and anybody who wanted to be a part of it could be. And we read the book, What's Within You. And it was just a great book to help really formulate what my vision was. And so through, lots of different examples in the book and exercises, I came to the conclusion that my vision is I share my experiences to connect with others and help them to feel seen and valued. And as I thought about that, I was like, oh, I love telling stories. I've been in marketing for over 20 years, and storytelling is just a strong way to connect with people. And so I said, after I read that, I'm like, I'm going to do more to help tell stories to connect with people both on and offline. So I've been sharing a lot more of my personal kind of journeys on LinkedIn that it's amazing in a short amount of time. People will text me, or when I see them at the office or outside the office, are like, oh, I love seeing all the stories you're sharing on LinkedIn. I was like, okay, that was my goal, just to connect with other people. So hopefully if they're going through a similar challenge, they would say, oh, okay, I don't feel alone, or thanks for that insight. So that book and that process really kind of helped me just reiterate to live a purpose-driven life. As part of that, we actually, with the What's Within Us, What's Within You book, we partnered with the nonprofit No Barriers out of Fort Collins, and we participated in What's Your Everest event in Copper Mountain this summer. And we were able to help people in wheelchairs, people who were blind or visually impaired, to reach the summit. So again, it was just so empowering to see the stories of people who had overcome adversity. And that's just something that'll stick with me forever. It started with reading a book, and then it's something that really impacted my life.
That's awesome. It's funny you talk about posting those personal stories on LinkedIn, and sometimes, if it doesn't get a like or a comment, you forget that people could still see it. And like recently, this is silly, but I got a fortune cookie from Panda Express, and it didn't have a fortune in it. And I just thought it was so funny. I'm like, what, and so I posted it, and all these people posted like, what does that mean? Right. You didn't get a fortune. And like, all these people posted funny things, but all these people posted funny things. A lot of people that didn't post anything, I would just run into them in day-to-day life, and they would mention the stupid fortune cookie to me. So I thought it was so funny. We look, as marketers, we look for engagement. Was there a like or whatever? Was there a comment or something? But we forget. A lot of times, yes, there's just that impression, and people just don't actually put anything in there. So with the book, where you talk about, and I can see how it impacted, your career and your direct interactions. What about your communication to customers? What about your marketing? Because that book actually, What's Within You, it's by Tom Lillig and David Shruna. And I saw Tom Lillig actually works as a director of brand management at an advertising agency. I mean, this is, some marketing folks there. And I noticed FNVO's tagline is more than 165 years of putting customers first, which I love, because customer first marketing Sherpa, big proponent of customer first marketing. We've done a lot of research into that. We show how effective it is. So I wonder, for you, have you been able to take any of these lessons from this book and apply it to putting the customer first with your marketing and your communications?
Yeah, definitely. So we call ourselves the Great Big Small Bank. And again, we focus a lot on storytelling. I mentioned, I think it's the most effective communication style. And at FMBO, we try to, emphasize the human connection between our brand and our customers, because we want to go beyond, it's banking, a functional relationship you're going to get, but we want to create that emotional connection. So I get the pleasure of telling stories of how we're impacting our communities across all of our markets. We champion our customer stories, and I really take pride in bringing them to life. We're helping customers' dreams come true, whether they're a small business customer or they're getting their first house with a mortgage. And I feel like if we tell those stories, maybe others will see them and say, oh, wow, I can do that too, or I've had that idea. And, my favorite thing to see on our social media channels from an engagement and commenting perspective is that's my bank, or this content really resonated with me. Thanks for the information. You've helped me with my financial journey. So I think just storytelling overall and being authentic, and bringing those characters and that conflict and resolution to life makes for really good stories and can help build that trust and credibility with us as a financial institution, and not just, we can talk about our products and services. That's great. And we do that, but telling stories is what really is going to engage our customers.
I love that, because that, as you can see, that's the whole idea behind How I Made It Marketing as well. And you use that word authentic though, right? And so, so many people use that word authentic. And so if we were just on a podcast where people were thought leaders say, be authentic, it sounds good in theory, right? But how do you do it when the rubber meets the road, when you're hitting deadlines, when the results aren't coming in, when there's cuts to budgets and layoffs and all of these things, when you're speaking to the CEO or difficult customer? And so I want to ask you about that, because your next lesson is learn how to be a good listener and be your authentic self. From Stephanie Moritz, the Chief Customer Innovation Officer at American Dental Association now. You worked with her. She was your former boss at ConAgra Foods. So take us into the room where it happens. Is there a time where it was difficult to be authentic? And how did you and Stephanie figure out how to do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, it always resonated with me that she said, listen uses the same letters as silent. And that really stuck with me because I'm a marketer and I've been in PR and social media. I love to talk. But she always encouraged that, if you listen, you're really going to hear people and understand the challenges they're going through. I kind of talked to that earlier. Like, I like to step back and say, what really, let's get to the root of the cause and the concern that people have. And by listening, it really helps you understand them and build trust and strengthen relationships, and, including everyone in the solution is going to get you to a better outcome. So I could say, okay, well, I just want to move forward with this and I'm just going to, push this content out. But if I don't get buy-in from the rest of the group, then, the result is not going to be as strong if you kind of bring everybody along with you. And I think it's important, just kind of going back to the living a purpose-driven life, like, how do you show up authentically? Because you can really tell if somebody is not being their authentic self. So one of the things that, I've done in the past few years is just, how am I going to show up, like, being authentic? What are the key values that I like to live by? And, I have these words written in every notebook. And now I was like, oh, I should be more vulnerable and write them on the outside instead of on the inside of my notebook, because I have integrity, gratitude, empathy, self-awareness. And that is kind of one of my goals. I want to try to even be more authentic and vulnerable by, maybe putting them on the outside instead of kind of hiding them where I can just see them. Yeah.
So is that your way of saying, hey, hold me accountable to this? Like, this is on the outside. Like, am I doing these things?
Yes, definitely. Because I just think through, like, what if I have my specific values that I want to live by every day, making sure that I'm not just showing up personally and living those, but also making sure that I'm living those out at in my professional career as well.
So, you've worked in large companies, in small companies, and agencies. In those really big companies, is it harder to do that? Is it harder to show up as your authentic self? I mean, I know I've interviewed CMO in the past, and I remember he said, the first time I became CMO, I was like, I'm not that type of person that people think. I don't have that Ivy League education. I don't have that slick suit. I don't have, I'm walking into this door as a CMO, and I don't know that people are seeing the person they think they should be seeing. And then he kind of had to realize and work his way into okay, well, I need to do this my way and I need to explain to people, who I am and share my personal experiences so they understand how I got here and kind of work with them and understand their personal experiences, like you said, listening. So I wonder, when you talk about working in some of the big companies you've worked in, working in some of the small companies, is it hard to not just get lost as a cog in there? Has there been anything you've been able to do or figure out so you can show up in that way and be your authentic self?
Yeah, I would say it's more challenging when you start a new career at a new company. But fortunately, I've been at the companies that I've worked with, all of them, for a long time, more than 5 years at each of them. And I have found that, when I do show up the way that I naturally show up, and I think people appreciate that more. And you may not see it at the moment, but being open and vulnerable, I've really tried to also, show not just the serious side. And we're all people and we're building relationships with other people at our companies. So letting them in to see, who you are as a person and, not take yourself so serious, but also while being professional, you can just, I feel like you build a relationship quicker if, people understand who you truly are.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way that's worked for me too is showing when you make a mistake, just coming out, admitting it, showing others, showing people report to you. Yeah, I make mistakes. I make them all the time. It's okay. You can do that too. Not that we want to all the time, right? But that's sometimes how we really push the envelope is make a mistake. You talked about listening too. And sometimes I feel like this gets short shrift in marketing. We're marketers. We're kind of blasting those messages out. Social media gave it a little bit of some ear play for us because we talked about social media listening, right? But when it comes to being a close listener, you talk about it's a sign of respect. I totally agree. I think sometimes it also helps you determine who is a fit. And so I wonder for you if you've ever, especially when you've been on the vendor side, had a client, you were potentially working with, or a vendor that was pitching you an agency, and by really closely listening, deciding whether they are a fit or they're not. Or anything you heard. Because, for example, I was interviewing David Apple, the Chief Marketing Officer of Intuitive Health, on How I Made It in Marketing. And one of his lessons was fancy terms can lead to bigger missed expectations. And he told a story about his role. He was on the vendor side before he went on the brand side. And he was talking about some of these brands he worked with. They were just using these big fancy terms and these buzzwords. And he kind of, clicked to him they don't really know what they're talking about. There's not this fit here. They just care about these buzzwords. They don't care about actually getting this thing done or understanding it. So I wonder for you, being a marketer, whether it's on the vendor side, it's so important to find the right brand partners. If it's on the brand side, it's so important to find those right agencies, those right platforms to work with. Has that close listening ever helped you find that right match, that right relationship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say 2 words that came to mind: research and insight. So when I've interviewed for roles on my teams or interviewing agencies or being on the agency side, the things that resonate with me the most is when, people can say, I've researched and this is what I know about your brand. And you can tell that they've really dug into researching and they have strong insights, because I've also seen when agency will come pitch a new idea and it's just, the kind of shiny object and it's the latest thing. And like, why would we do that? Because that doesn't resonate with our audience. We're not active on that channel. Snapchat is a good example. Like, you need to be on Snapchat. I'm like, why? Why does that make sense? So what I've always appreciated is when people really dig in and they know your brand and your tone and your voice. And when I was on the agency side, very long time ago, I really loved that challenge of the insights of the customer and the consumer insights and digging into them and coming up with unique ideas to meet those challenges. That was really fun because I worked on so many different brands when I was at Weber Shandwick, and you could just tell, like, if you researched the consumer and had really deep insights in coming up with ideas that would reach that customer.
No, I love that. I've always said writing, and I'm even talking about pitching too, but writing is 80% knowing what to say. It's only 20% saying it well, like getting those right words. And it comes to that research. And, one of my pet peeves is you get a pitch I've noticed this mostly from PR agencies and SEO agencies. It's not to pick on them, where it's clearly a templated pitch, right? And it's like, okay, you expect us to take you seriously. It's like insert name here and insert a few numbers there and insert like a screen capture of our homepage. Like, really? But yeah, the research I worked on the agency side in very early days, and part of that research was really trying to figure out or get in the minds of the decision makers, which was harder back then. But as you mentioned now, like with LinkedIn or some of these social platforms, like if you're not going there and seeing like, what is that person posting? What are they interested in right now? How can I tap into that conversation, understand that motivation? Then you're just falling short. So great example. I love that. Let's talk about one more lesson you learned here. Lead by example rather than micromanaging. And you learned this from Joy Farber-Colo, the Chief Brand Officer at Weber Shandwick, who was your first boss right out of college. So how did you learn this from Joy?
Yeah, she was the perfect first boss for me to have. I learned so much from her. And when I actually started, I kind of had a few different bosses there and worked on several different clients. And she actually gave me the most work to do, but I loved it the most and was willing to, stay late, work weekends, because she guided me, but she let me kind of lead it. And, being fresh out of college, she trusted the work that I was doing. And so I always, as I advanced in my career and was a boss and managed people at Conagra Foods as well as F&BO, I always try to kind of think through what the attributes were that I loved about having her as a boss. And she just did not micromanage. So I love that she guided me. She gave direction. She held me accountable. She communicated often. And even if it was just like a 5-minute conversation, she wanted to know, what do you need from me? Do you have any questions? And then would guide me based on those, but never felt like she was micromanage me. And she also, again, going back to the authenticity, she always really wanted to make sure that her employees were showing up in an authentic way, which those things have really stuck with me over the years. And I think have helped make my teams successful.
So when it comes to trusting those new employees, leading by example, not micromanaging, if you lead a team of content creators, a team on social media, sometimes they're out there speaking for the brand very quickly. So is there something you've built so you have a trust with them, so they have that trust within themselves to be able to do that, to listen, to speak, to react quickly? Because, as I mentioned, when I started my career, maybe when you were starting Weber Shandwick too, it was, if you were doing something on behalf of the brand, it went through a lot of approvals because it was like a print campaign or something, right? And it took a long time before it saw the light of day. Versus now, where we have to move so quickly, social listening, like our teams could be out there very quickly listening and responding, and they, that sometimes have to do it on their own, so to speak. So what do you build into your team to make sure even those fairly fresh out of college or fairly entry-level employees are able to do that? They believe in themselves, and you and the brand believe in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of training up front on brand tone and voice. We try to plan as much as we can ahead of time. So we have responses, a long list, a huge document with responses for any different question we'll get on social media. But to your point, there's always something that arises that maybe we're not prepared for. And so typically, again, we just text each other really quick, or we'll email or walk over if we're in the office together and say, hey, we just saw this. Are we aligned on the response? And then we do a lot of strategic planning for our branded channels up front, have guidelines. But again, I empower the team to develop that content. A lot of times there'll be a trending topic that comes up and we're like, okay, we saw this and now we need to brainstorm something really quick because we want to leverage and be a part of that conversation quickly because, before it moves on to the next trending topic in 5 minutes. And so a lot of times, especially with video, we're like, we got to go capture this like today. And a lot of the times my team will just go do it. And then if it's something that they think might be questionable, they'll send it to me before for approval. But most of the time I trust them. They know the brand, they know, kind of our tone and how we would respond as a company. It's well ingrained in them. So I just kind of let them go and lead with it. And my boss, she'll say, just don't get us in trouble. I'm like, okay, I've been here 8 years, haven't got in trouble. So again, it's that relationship building over time. A lot of people on my team have been at FMBO for a long time. And then there's some newer team members. So we all kind of learned from each other and learn as you go as well.
Well, Regina, we talked about so many different things about what it can mean to be a marketer. For you, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer? Who are you looking to be? What are you looking for when you hire?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always look for somebody who is passionate and curious. They don't need to have experience, in my opinion, in the banking industry. If they are passionate and curious and ask questions and are good marketers overall. I mean, I came from both at Weber Shandwick and at ConAgra Foods. It was CPG background, and those were the only clients I had. So people were surprised when I went to work for a bank. They're like, you don't have any banking knowledge. And I was like, no, but I have a lot of experience in marketing, and I don't think it matters where you're marketing. If you have that experience, it translates well no matter where you go. So those are the main things. It doesn't always have to be the experience that people have or their backgrounds, but just in that interview process, I ask a lot just to see, if they are curious and passionate.
Well, thank you for sharing what you've learned from your experiences. Regina, you're clearly very passionate.
I try to be. Yes, my whole family and everyone I work with, they always have a lot of energy and put a lot of thought in what I do. And I clearly have loved marketing. I've been doing over 20 years, and it's always a fun challenge.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks for being on, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.